Commissioner Grindal.
Here.
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Wright is absent. Commissioner Hoyt.
Here.
Vice Chair Ligness.
Present.
And President Erickson.
Here. If you will, join me to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have an agenda before us. I'll look for a motion to approve or amend.
I move we approve the agenda.
A second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have an agenda. Next, we have an open forum. An opportunity for any citizen who wishes to speak to this body on any matter. Just ask you to keep it to about 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll close the open forum. And we have a consent agenda before us. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. First regular agenda item, Abby, we've got the Minnesota Technology Corridor.
Thank you, President Erickson, members of the EDA. In 2018, the City of Forest Lake, along with other I-35 corridor communities, both Anoka County, Washington County's community development agencies, Connexus Energy, formed an economic development initiative known as the Minnesota Technology Corridor. The intent of the initiative was to regionally market the area for high-quality development due to the access to the infrastructure that this corridor has. Included in the memo in your packet from Gregory from Gills from the Anoka County EDA, long-range planning documents between all these entities have kind of created some mismatched standards on what ultimately should be designed for Elmcrest Avenue, a very prominent roadway, our western boundary in the city. And as part of this significant economic development initiative, the 4 cities and the 2 county EDAs staff have been meeting for a while to talk about that corridor's future design. As a reminder to some members of the EDA, our southwest corner, a lot of that land area is guided for non-residential development. And this Elmcrest corridor really leads from the Love's Travel Plaza all the way down to the Otter Lake Road extension in Lino Lakes. And so this is a pretty significantly sized corridor between these 4 cities, 2 counties, that we believe should have a good regional design and plan. And so the 4 city staff, in conjunction with the EDAs, have drafted the enclosed cooperative agreement, which indicates that the parties in the agreement will agree to a scope of services for a request for proposals to solicit, get help to create a design that all of the agencies can agree to. We would develop and agree to a funding formula and then execute a professional development agreement and then create a design for the Elmcrest Avenue corridors. In essence, what we're looking to do is to figure out what's that roadway gonna look like. Is it a 2-lane road? Is it a 4-lane road? Is it divided? How far are the roads, access points separating? Are they gonna be roundabouts? Maybe some of these things we won't be able to quite figure out. When I just saw this, said, are they gonna be roundabouts or stoplights? But that's the whole intent, is for the 4 cities and the 2 county EDAs to work together to try to figure out that design. We believe with that design, then we can take that to county, regional policymakers in the state and start to look to see if we can't get some development plans on long-range planning documents for the future development of Elmcrest Avenue. All staff in the county EDAs do believe that this is a significant economic development initiative, that this underlying planning needs to be done for the roadway to eventually be built. And it's just the start of a pretty significant economic development project in the region. So included in here tonight is your consideration of a motion for the City Council, and so staff would recommend the EDA motion to recommend the City Council approve the corridor cooperative agreement for Elmcrest Avenue. Any questions?
Good.
I have two, Abby. The first is regarding the cost sharing formula. Do we have any idea of, or at least from the staff side in conversations, is that being led in the direction of it's going to be split basically in 6, or are the counties going to take on more, or is it going to be a formula that will take into account that some of the cities may benefit greater than others?
That hasn't been determined yet, and that was something that we actually initially in the cooperative agreement had drafted, that it was kind of a blind cost share. And Forest Lake, at least from the city's perspective, said, hey, maybe we need to just kind of figure out this cost share funding before we end up soliciting or before we end up engaging with a consultant. I think the big thing first is we need to figure out how much it's going to cost. I do believe, and Chris Eng might be able to confirm this, that the county does have pre-development dollars that would go to help this. The county's pre-development funding system is it's 80-20 or 50-50 depending on the scope of the project. It's obviously the city's hopes that the counties will take more of the share, but I think it's how much is that going to cost and where can we tap into existing funding sources to see what that gap is. Then I would say it is at least my hope that it would be at least an equal share amongst the cities, because if you do look at who has more developable area versus non-developable area, there are cities that have very limited development area along that corridor, but will also greatly benefit because it's leading right into their community and connecting through these on this kind of in this region. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just wanted to see if I could understand. And I would normally be quite hesitant on entering into or suggesting that the council enter into an agreement where we don't know what the cost share is, but I have great trust in our neighboring communities and think that we have good partnerships. So it doesn't cause me hesitation. My other question that I have is it's on page 15 of our packet. It's the last one where the signatories are. So for Anoka County and each of the cities, it names the signatory as the County of Anoka, the City of Columbus, but for Washington County, it says Washington County Community Development Authority. And I was just curious on why that differentiation exists only for the one of the 6.
President Erickson, a member, like this, I can maybe address that one. So in Washington County, the Community Development Agency is the Economic Development Authority for the county. And in Anoka County, it's actually Anoka County. They don't have an EDA or a CDA, so it's actually county staff. And as Abby mentioned in the past, we would hope to be a funding partner with the cities to partner with you to bring grant fundings to the project to do the studies. And so from an economic development perspective, not necessarily from a transportation planning perspective, but just economic development overall, we would welcome the opportunity to partner with the cities. Hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions for Abby or Chris?
I was just going to say, in the steps identified here, it looks like step number 3 is to scope out, as part of a committee that's formed, the funding formula recommendations. I mean, so it looks like, you know, a lot of the next steps are sort of, what does this look like? How would we work with these other, I think it's 6 total entities, correct?
That is
What that would
correct.
look like. So I think a lot of it would be fleshed out there. And then, you know, if we don't like the looks or the sounds of that, we aren't beholden to anything, correct?
That is correct. I mean, this is the first step in each of these agencies kind of signing on to work together, to formally, yes, we're going to work in partnership with one another. There are opportunities, I think, in the future when we talk about when we enter into agreements and those sorts of things are going to have to come back for discussion, make sure all parties are on board and moving forward.
Great. Great questions. Anybody else? Chris, is there anything that you want to add beyond what the conversation has been thus far, as being one of the 6 partners? Yeah, is there anything else you want to add to the discussion, just as one of the 6 partners?
Yeah, just to make sure I understand the question, could you repeat it one more time?
I was just curious if you wanted to add anything to Abby's comments as far as being one of the 6 partners.
Yeah, just real briefly, we did talk with the Hugo EDA 2 weeks ago, and they approved recommendation to the city council, and the city council, I think, will be taking this forward in January for consideration and likely approval. It's just pretty high level at this point in time. I don't think we're at the point we're going to dive down and do specs and plans and stuff like that, but it's just, how do we work together to look at this area from an economic development perspective again, to make sure that it makes sense for everybody? And I think the coordination and the collaboration will be a good effort in conjunction with the Minnesota Technology Corridor. Our intent all along has been to add tax base, commercial and industrial market values and good paying jobs to this corridor. And I think that's kind of still our intent moving forward, and that's kind of where we'll leave our focuses going forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Ryan, just a question, and maybe really more just point for public. Can you just explain where conversations have been between an interchange out 180th versus one at 170th, and what you see the likelihood? And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this is all part of that, and just that'd be good for public knowledge to hear.
Yep, so the city of Forest Lake was involved with Columbus in the past, working on discussions of planning for a future interchange at 180th. Wasn't likely supported by the city of Hugo and Lino Lakes to the degree Forest Lake and Columbus were in support of it. In the transportation county plans of Anoka and Washington County, it does show a future interchange at 170th, already some infrastructure there at 35E. So with all that being said, and now the group working closer and closer together, that the desire is to look at a future interchange at 170th, but this Elmcrest is a key component to that region. And as identified in our comprehensive plans, this is a planned turnback road to the county someday as a frontage road to I-35, which will then feed into all that land that was rezoned part of the last comprehensive plan of the city of Forest Lake. That would be that commercial. What's the actual zoning, that southwest? So this is that key component to that area. Obviously, it's going to have a positive effect on our own infrastructure as you get into Fenway, right? Because now Fenway won't have to be as robust, because think of all the traffic that comes up I-35. And then they exit at 97 just to go back south down Everton or Fenway to get to their homes. So if you have that other roadway network that's coming at 170th, and then Elmcrest is a fully developed county road someday, how it can just feed in all these other properties. And that's really the main component that the city should focus on, that how do we get that developed, you know? And then this study, if you look at the boundaries of it, you see those 290s that are in the Forest Lake Columbus area. Part of that study is gonna most likely recommend either a roundabout at probably one of those intersections, or you're gonna realign the road to meet a certain mile-per-hour curve, and this is the property we're gonna have to reserve, and how are you gonna then develop and all that around that to account for that future need right there. So I think it's good being this early, so properties aren't already developed, and then now you're buying existing tax base while it's practicing, right? So.
Thank you.
All right, well, I read through the agreement, and I thought it made a lot of sense. I appreciate your guys' going over it for us. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve, send this to the council for recommendation?
I second it.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next on the agenda is our 2026 meeting dates and time.
Yeah, thank you, President Erickson, members of the EDA. In 2026, the City of Forest Lake, with input from this body, changed the EDA's meeting date to the first Monday of the month. It was giving the EDA sufficient time, or at least more time than the 1 hour before council, another meeting was coming in here. But keeping that time at 5:30. At our last meeting, the City Council discussed adjusting some of the board and commission meeting start times. Right now, the council's meeting start time is 6 o'clock, as is the Planning Commission. There's just been some confusion, I think, from either members of bodies or the general public of what time that public meeting starts. There's some that start at 5:30 and some that start at 6:30. So the council is wondering about the EDA's favorability to keeping your meeting time the first Monday of the month, but potentially changing it to 6 PM in 2026, just for organizational consistency. So tonight, just for your discussion, is whether or not you're favorable to that. From staff's perspective, I know the start times being consistent would be helpful, because it's even confusing sometimes of what time we got to get meeting rooms ready and all doors unlocked and that sort of thing. So staff's recommendation is for you to discuss this, and if you're favorable, motion to adjust the 2026 meeting start times for inclusion on the city meeting calendar to the first Monday of the month at 6 PM.
Anybody opposed to the idea of starting at 6 PM and half hour later than what we're currently doing? Well, hearing no opposition to the idea, anybody want to make a motion to adjust our meeting start time for the city council?
I'll move to adjust the standard meeting start time to 6 PM.
Continuing on the first Monday of the month.
Correct.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We've got a meeting time for 2026. All right, that ends our regular agenda action items, and we're going to move into discussion. We got a couple of topics on the agenda. It looks like Ryan's going to start with the Southwest Forest Lake Infrastructure Phasing Study.
President Erickson, other members of the EDA tonight, we prepared a PowerPoint, kind of go over the scope of the project and then give you some background and then kind of go into some of the findings that are preliminary have been identified. Obviously, if you got any questions, feel free to ask, but I just want to bring this forth to you guys prior to moving forward with anything else. So the study location is just the extension of Headwaters Parkway, southwest portion of the city of Forest Lake, west of Fenway Avenue, north of 190th, on how the potentially Headwaters Parkway would connect to Elmcrest Avenue in the future. The scope of the project was preparation of two conceptual layouts for discussion that will lead to one final two-dimensional layout of the preferred Headwaters Parkway alignments extension to Elmcrest. Once the roadway network's completed and finalized, then we'll work in including sanitary sewer and water main, how to serve this area for future development. And the final layouts, it'll meet state aid requirements for design speed of 40 miles per hour. It's consistent with the existing portion of Headwaters Parkway. Reason why we want it to be a state aid road, so obviously this will be a road that'll take a lot of traffic in the future, and we're allowed to designate so many miles of roadway in the city as a state aid route, and if you do so, then you can use your state aid construction dollars to help fund that improvement in the future for reconstruction. But if I don't have the footprint that would allow me to meet a state aid roadway right off the bat, and then we can't meet a state aid design in the future, anyway, we wouldn't be eligible to that pot of money. So that's what the state aid reference is. It's knowing it's going to be a major road, it's going to carry a lot of traffic, it's going to have show a lot of needs and meets a lot of warrants in the state aid system. So that's why I just kind of brought that up too. But we're going to engage with property owners along the proposed concept alignments to discuss potential impacts to their properties and outline the property acquisition that needs to be identified. We did meet with the property owners 2 weeks ago upstairs, kind of went through the same presentation on information that you guys are seeing tonight too. With the property owners there was the developer of Hidden Creek that was in the room as well. Identify easements and right-of-way needed for the Headwaters Parkway extension to Elmcrest Avenue. I did a wetland investigation delineation to understand the developable area and use this information to coordinate with the technical evaluation panel on potential alignment that would be supported and for the future to allow for the extension of the parkway. And then once we get all that dialed in, and then we'll start preparing preliminary stormwater design to determine feasible treatment alternatives for the proposed final Headwaters Parkway extension. And then ultimately we'd finish with completed preliminary cost estimates for the layout of the parkway. That would also include the utilities to serve that area too, just for future planning. Little history in the area from the 2006 master PUD preparation that was done back in the day. You can see what's the whole Headwaters development was going to look like. The extension of the parkway had a separated parkway at that time, but as permitting restrictions had become stricter, you know, back when this first came, we didn't have wetland buffers, we didn't, you know, stuff like that. So stormwater ponding was much smaller just to meet the rules and requirements today. It just doesn't make sense to have a separated parkway and take up that much developable land, and that's why after Fenway you see it's come together and just a concrete median down the middle, still creating a safe and efficient traffic routes, but and controlling access to the corridor, so it's safe to maneuver through, but not having a separated dual roadways that were between Fenway and Highway 61 that you see. Conceptual layout option 1 pretty much mimics what was outlined in the original PUD, that it would come and tie in through 195th and out to Elmcrest, just off to that circle on the left. We just assumed there would be a proposed roundabout. That was one of the areas that I talked about at 90 in the Elmcrest Hornsby area, and that Columbus border, city of Forest Lake border, that potentially could be realigned and you'd have a smooth transition curve. But that would have to be something that would be planned for with that study that you guys talked about earlier. So with this, you can see that if the roadway were to be extended in this proximity where it was planned, wetlands would be impacting. The area highlighted in blue would be the impact of the roadway, and the areas that are identified in the circle or outline of the purple line, that's the wetland boundaries that have been delineated. So that was option 1 that we've looked at. Option 2 looked at farther and more robust collector through this area, how it could serve more footprint of development. Also coming down property parcel boundaries, you'll have dual ownership on each side. Now you're not just impacting one property to bring it right through the middle. You got, you know, your shared land on both sides. And then as we turn south where we do, and then head straight west, that really is now separating different zoning uses of properties on the north side and the south side there too. So a nice transition in that area. Looked at wetland impacts in that area too, and I'll have a summary on some of the next pages. So here's the wetland delineations that we were completed in the area, and outside of this area to the north, the developers already completed some that we utilize those. Mostly the stuff that is being impacted with option 2 is a type 1. There was a lot of type 2 impacts with the option 1. Now, obviously, if we're impacting type 1s, sometimes you don't have as strict mitigation requirements, but you should anticipate like a 2-to-1. So we're trying to minimize the amount of wetland impacts as we could, but conversation I have had with Abby just earlier tonight, that's one thing to also look at is if you're building a road for regional purposes and you're going to serve a big area, it's a little easier to get permitted and allowed to impact a wetland. You're still going to have to mitigate it. That means you can either go build the same wetland at a 2-to-1 ratio, usually a minimum in the area, and then after so many years, then they get approve it as a new wetland, right? Or you can go buy wetland credits. But if you just go build this road and I say I don't want to impact or disturb any wetlands, I could certainly go do that, right? But in the future, if a developer then is left with wetland area, he's not going to get the approval from the TEP panel to go I want to take all these wetlands out of here and I'll mitigate that. No, no, no. We're going to have to go through a sequencing process, and he's going to most likely not have as much developable land as he thought he was going to be able to, because he's not going to get approval to impact wetlands like you would with a regional project serving regional, providing regional service. So the difference between the two conceptual options, option one does disturb 1.13 acres. It's less expensive than option two, but it serves a much smaller developable area. And you start laying out what developments could look like, and if your major collector is farther away and you got all this housing in the middle, they're gonna have to travel pretty far to get to a collector, which is gonna be either Headwaters Parkway, or the next one probably is gonna be 190th, right? So now if we bend that down and bring that forward, now you're kind of picking up all the neighborhoods to come to that major collector, not having a lot of cut through traffic of neighborhoods. So with the option two alignments, it provides a lot easier connectivity for that neighborhood to get to that collector easier. Option two disturbed a little less options. You know, obviously both options are going to have different impacts with the Hornsby-Elmcrest future intersection interchanges when that's ultimately designed, but that'll come with a future more robust road project that's we're kind of outlined in the study tonight that was approved. Option two, one of the differences is we start crossing the JD4 branch 3, but we know about that. We also, the city also has another study going on with that, where they've received money from the legislation on doing some stormwater in that area. It's the same process we already have had to do where the Headwaters Parkway was built, going all the way up, starting at the airports. Drain tile came all the way down through there, the original portion of Headwaters, crosses Fenway, and then crosses back up through into what is known as Hidden Creek right now, the active development in that area where they're building all the houses, where we had to go through that transfer of that tiled in some areas, then the tile gets removed and replaced with either storm sewer pipe or open channel flow. So not an uncommon procedure, but it is something that you would have to deal with option two that you don't in option one, because we've already crossed it. It's now starting to head south. Like I already just mentioned quickly too, there will be future wetland impacts too with Elmcrest improvements. Other design considerations, this is a map preliminary wetland management corridor, the WMCA on the properties. Basically that means the wetland impacts will trigger stormwater permitting, or just like every other development that it has in that area. And we'd have to work through those approvals with the watershed and the TET panel and have a design that meets that stuff accordingly. Obviously down in this area too, the 100-year flood elevations are going to be reviewed closely by Rice Creek Watershed District and city permitting. This also is going to be identified and reviewed within the JD4 study that is looking at the current future flood elevation. So a lot of that information is already being developed. It's something that we have to look at every development anyways. So it's not, again, not something new, just pointing out some things that are also kept in mind when you're looking at these layouts. Next step of this study really is to determine the preferred alignments, and you can dial in a lot of those other scopes, tasks that I talked about earlier, and then prepare that preliminary stormwater design to the proposed final Headwaters Parkway extension, and prepare preliminary cost estimates for a final layout of Headwaters Parkway, and then including all the utility layouts as well. And then finalize a study. So it's just kind of a quick PowerPoint to give you guys some background on the scope, the history, and the two alignments that have been generated from the work that's been done to date.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Ryan, what was the feedback that you received from the landowners and developer that you met with last week, or was it 2 weeks ago?
You want to recap that email?
Sure. So we have heard from, so there are 6 affected landowners, or families, we should say. One of the families that are on kind of the eastern side are favorable to the option 2 approach. We have heard from the developer of Hidden Creek, who has also had a concept plan for Hidden Creek South. Hidden Creek South moving to the south of the existing Hidden Creek and across the other side of the parkway. That concept plan, they've submitted a preliminary plat, which does show it following the option 1 alignment. So kind of that moving kind of more straight down.
Option 2.
Excuse me, option 2, thank you. We did hear from some people in the meeting that thought that Headwaters should connect straight down to 190th. But from a regional transportation system and kind of that skeleton or that network, you really want to get your smaller roads to your bigger roads to your bigger roads. And so leading two collectors together to then end up at Elmcrest isn't as desirable. Just today, I did speak with one property owner that would probably be, I can't say most affected, but would be affected by either option, either on their northern property line or their southern property line. Offering a third proposal for the city to consider, which really did kind of bisect their property, almost kind of a third and 2/3. I said that I would share that, at least thought with the EDA, the Planning Commission Council, see if we want to study a third alignment. Staff can see the perspective that there could potentially be less roadway, like just foot for foot, in a third option. However, we are concerned, as Ryan had mentioned, that this third alternative, though it minimizes wetland impacts to nearly zero, it pushes those impacts onto then those future developers. Where the city in its infrastructure planning does, I can't say has a little more leeway. A wetland impact's a wetland impact, but wetland impacts for regional infrastructure purposes are viewed a little bit more favorably than a wetland impact for more houses. And so I can't say that it was overwhelmingly one way or another, but I think the neighborhood is really looking for having this direction so at least this development community can move forward. That's one thing I hear pretty consistently.
What was the, or can you describe the route for this potential third option? I'm not visualizing it from your words.
Ryan, could you just bring up the option 1 really quick? You take that kind of the new proposal and instead, I don't know if that's actually working, where it's touching the existing parkway, if you went from that northeast corner to about the middle of the western property boundary of that first 40 acres, it kind of split that property in thirds. Can I?
Was this even further north than where it's showing here?
Yeah.
North of the wetlands?
Correct. Oh, it
Oh, so
actually,
it would-
excuse me, go to the next option. I was wrong. And is the
North of option 2, but south of option 1.
so if it, can you see my, you can't.
That's if you get out of the,
Oh, yeah.
now, can you see the cursor?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want option 1, so.
Actually, it was option 2 is better to show. It's actually from this point, so still coming down in that option 2, but then kind of snaking that around and cutting this piece here in like a third and a 2/3. I think it really was trying to preserve this property's kind of development and isolate it a little bit, but also the concern of having infrastructure costs, future development infrastructure costs on an east property line, a west property line, and how that might make the property a little less desirable from a development perspective. From staff's perspective, I can understand that, you know, it puts that infrastructure, there's more infrastructure on this property in the option 2 route, but we do also believe that that connection, the roadway connects to more significant amount of properties, thereby making kind of all of the land area a little bit more desirable. Whereas some of those properties further east, not having connection to the parkway extension has been greater infrastructure costs to try to get their roadways to the parkway. That help address at least the inquiries that were and give you a better visual frame for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is this all paid by development? Or is this parkway will be paid by?
So historically, development has paid its way, right?
As you said, option 2 is more expensive than option 1.
Well, it's longer. It's gonna have more development along it.
But if the cost is being covered by the developer. My concern.
That's a challenge, right? I mean, in the past, everything that's been developed in the city through a plat has been paid by a developer. Does policy change in the future? That's a higher conversation that two people here could certainly have, but do you want it to happen now? That's another conversation, right? You know, Headwaters 123 in the roundabout at Fenway. Nothing was really happening there for a long time, right? Well, we went and got a grant for the city for $750,000, and that's how that was all built. So there's those opportunities out there too. If you have a document that's, you know, we approve and this is the plan moving forward, that then sets you up for opportunity to chase some of this with funding. If we're just extending it by plats, and where we're going, okay, this plat fits here, so now we're making sure that we got that 40-mile-an-hour curve, so here we go, right? But now if you have something like this, you could start chasing some grant funding and apply to this, and so it gives you more opportunities, right? It's gonna be better for permitting in the future, having a final approved alignment, because this is the regional plan, how to serve this regional area. We need this alignment, right? Having this plan also sets up stuff for grant opportunities, also sets up now that somebody sees you have a plan, it might develop even faster, so.
It was just in relation to kind of, as Mayor Roberts was bringing up before, in relation to the technology corridor, you know, and working with the other, you know, neighboring communities and things, like how does the timing work with that? Like, is there something that if we were to do this before that committee work is done, is there anything that would jeopardize what we might want to do or what's decided from that committee in terms of development? That they would say, well, shoot, now we can't do that because this was already put in place. Does it make sense to, or we can't wait on this until those decisions are made? I'm just wondering the timing on both of those projects, because they do kind of intertwine, right?
I think coming in to Elmcrest Avenue, as shown in option 2, makes Elmcrest more flexible in the future. If I come in right here at a 90-degree angle, it's either gonna be a roundabout or there's gonna be a significant change on what's already there today with the existing roadway to make that intersection safe and efficient in the future. So if they know where we're coming in, that's all they're gonna need to know, and then how to plan on intersection spacing and stuff like that, and how to serve other parcels. As you can see, we kind of thought about that on our own at this level of study. Right here, future intersection. Here, future intersection, to allow how, you know, this one could certainly slide over this way too. So it's not stuck there, but basically we're looking at probably having 3 more intersections on this major collector. So that way we have nice spacing on intersection control, access to this roadway, and then now that, you know, we're showing our connection out to Elmcrest, so when they go through the study, they're gonna take this stuff, and then they'll utilize that and implement it into their own project, and use that. So Elmcrest is just probably a 30-foot wide gravel road out there right today, right? And that's what all it is. That's gonna be significantly changed, and it'll be easy to connect into right where you're coming at Elmcrest on option 2. So,
If I might just pop in and just say, I think also to kind of help address, because it's a great question, I think you bring up, Jill, are we in a chicken and an egg situation? If you've kind of got this traffic study going on, or, economic development study going on, focusing on the infrastructure networks, and another one coming along, could our decision negatively impact? The thing I think that we've all identified in the kind of regional cooperative group is the further north you go on Elmcrest, we have these two 90-degree that I want to say they're both in Columbus, right? Neither of them are necessarily ours. Something's going to have to happen there. And there's some very limited, the land development is limiting in that there's quite a bit of wetland. And it's not most likely, those 90s are going to have to go away for that future design. If we've got a road coming right in there, right where that road, that 90 already has to change, is that going to negatively impact that in some way? I think I would, at least to what Ryan's saying, is moving this, wherever the parkway comes, further from that 90 can help create better options for that western boundary in the future.
And option 2 is plenty far north, is what you're saying?
Plenty far south.
South of those 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can pull up another, so you can kind of see, if you're not as familiar, Ryan and I are always working in maps all the time and can kind of see this in our head where.
President Erickson, as she does that, can I ask Brian a
Yeah.
question? So the whole idea to go straight down to 190th, is that just a hard no from staff? And because it seems as though if you already have a road in place, you're only talking 5 blocks difference. I don't know, maybe you'd have to tear the whole road up and start from scratch anyway. But then not only that, is you have another out to 61 if you run to 190th. Because you have a lot of people that could be living in that area that are going to want to take 61 to go south to White Bear, to Hugo, and maybe even north to Forest Lake. That just seems cost-wise, and maybe just giving us more options for traffic, that you have 2 ways to go once you hit 190th, as opposed to only being able to go west.
well, that's, okay, so when we're laying this out, when you're looking specifically south of Highway 97 and west of 61, your only collectors you're gonna have are Headwaters Parkway, 190th, and 180th. There's a lot of constraints already along 190th that are gonna probably prohibit what kind of width you can get. You got some developments, just south of here when we show up the map, of those, the neighbors, and then you got a lot of wetlands to the east there, and then you also got, a historic house on a corner at Fenway and 190th, right? So having another collector in the location that's being proposed with option 1 or 2, it's gonna segregate that traffic and not push it all to 190th right in that particular area. You got residential housing right there. That's not the intent you want to build a collector to, right? Take traffic to an area that's really not set up for it. With the construction of the parkway already completed, a lot of studies have gone into that, and how this has been reflected in comprehensive plans and county traffic plans and stuff like that, that we're trying to get traffic in between 61 and future Elmcrest. I mean, you gotta really think about what is the future Elmcrest gonna be, and all the development that could happen along that now if I just have a major collector, as we do with Headwaters Parkway that's constructed today, and take that down to 190th, and then now all the traffic's gotta go west or east out of there, I think we're gonna create a lot more issues and impacts to that particular area, 190th, than if we can get you to those county roads in the future more efficiently and safely. But with all the land that's still gonna be left on both sides of this parkway, you're gonna have a lot of development, you're gonna have a lot of traffic that's gonna be coming into that neighborhood to use this particular parkway. So it's definitely supported that you're gonna want another roadway, but if you bring it all the way straight south to 190th, now you're creating a big impact that's not the intent of what Headwaters Parkway was being built and extended to serve.
If I might also just pop in, we have heard from the owner of the property that was right on the corner of 190th, and if the parkway went straight to the south, and is very much in opposition of a collector road that close to their historic farm site. So though in the meeting, I think they expressed favorability and questioned whether or not that could happen, after taking really a look at what that would do to their property, realized that's not something they'd want to see in the future. So for reference, when we talk about the 290s, this is Elmcrest Avenue. It's labeled as Lions. There's about 15 different names for this road. We continue to call it Elmcrest because that's what we call it, at least. But we've got a pretty significant 90 where it turns from north-south gravel. I think this is the location where we start to get maybe into a more improved, I don't think it's a truly asphalted road, but then another pretty significant 90, leading up on the backside. This is where you're on the backside of Bear, I think is down there, Truckle Line is down there. All of this is kind of leading to that same kind of development that's going to be happening along this corridor. Look at how big. Still keeping your eyes on that roadway all the way down to County Road, this is 14 in Lino Lakes. This is Otter Lake Road, right where that Dairy Queen is. It's gonna extend up and just gonna keep extending through Lino Lakes into Hugo all the way, all the way, all the way up. That kind of gives you that area that that corridor study would be looking at, and then in our one little piece of trying to get people in this neighborhood, either, east to Elmcrest, west to 61.
So on the study itself, kind of really the question tonight is this, are we limited just to those two? The scope of that study would just be those two alternatives?
That was the scope of the study, and that is what we've looked at, was these two alternatives. We did share at least the one landowner's, concern, and whether or not there'd be the desire to study another alternative, kind of cutting through the two-thirds of this property. But since our meeting, we have received that preliminary plat, which does kind of show the roadway extending on in that option 2. This is sometimes what happens when development drives the infrastructure planning, right, is now we're in a situation where we're going to have to act on a plat within 120 days in the middle of a planning study that was trying to identify that alignment, where clearly this developer is letting us know where they prefer that alignment. Now, that being said, I think Ryan and I has shared with the landowners, and will continue to kind of share with the community and you. The option 2 alignment, though the blue line here might not be the exact alignment, really is that separating between the areas that the city is guiding now for highway business and the areas that the city is guiding for residential uses. And so there is, I think, an opportunity for that roadway to really help with those transitional land uses, or the transition between those two land uses, in a different way than a collector going right through residential on both sides. It doesn't always have that same neighborhoodly feel.
If seems like 170th is probably the more realistic interchange there, and now we're 20 blocks, well, not 20, yes, 10 to 20 blocks. Is Hugo, what are they zoned on their north end? Are they zoned highway commercial?
On their north end, they've got some residential, but, and Chris might be able to confirm, I believe they're doing a planning study right now to look at some land uses in that northwest corner and re-guiding them differently. Included in your packet was a part of the corridor study. This is a really big map, and it takes a kind of second if we move it around some, that looks at those future land uses on, doesn't like to move quickly, or well, 1 minute's just really locked up on me. That mostly the corridor, the Elmcrest corridor is non-residential uses. Hugo has some outlying areas through there, but they're looking at a study right now to see about changing those from residential to the non-residential land uses. All four cities in the 2 counties recognize that if we're going to have another interchange someday, be that at 170th or 180th, that corridor has to develop out, and that infrastructure really has to be in place before the highway system, the jurisdictions overseeing it are going to see a need for an interchange in those locations. And developing those out for greater intensity uses and those non-residential uses are going to help be more supportive for an interchange in the future.
So it sounds like with this plat that's coming forward, and we have 120 days, that really is almost guiding us which option we almost have to take on this, right? I mean,
It definitely, I mean, it just came in on Wednesday. Ryan's like, what plat are you talking about?
I opened it up before I left tonight, so
We knew it was coming, which is part of what was our catalyst for, hey, we need to study this to see if we can get out in front of it. I think that there's still the potential to look at, the option, of maybe curving that somewhat, coming down and curving it. But I do think what we're just doing is and I wish I could show, and maybe Ryan could pull the podium screen back up. If we're going to cut that roadway closer to what I would call northwest from the option 1, it's really not serving developable land area to the north of the roadway. The further north and west we go, the closer we are to Elmcrest, those 90s, wetlands. There's just not a lot of developable land area on those sides. And the intent of collector roads is to kind of build them in areas where we're bringing the development to them and feeding that to the larger transportation network.
I just think of the developments that are over here off of Goodview. If you take 210th and you live fairly close to 210th, you have that nice access to that collector, and you can get out back to Goodview pretty easily. If you're way back in the corner and how it was developed, I mean, how many times do you turn in to get out of your own neighborhood? So a lot of thought behind that efficiency to get to a collector, slows traffic in neighborhoods, less aggressiveness, less people running stop signs. Do people, abide by some of that? But now having that easy access from both sides, and you can see how some of the ghost platting's laid out here in option 2, you can see how very simple it is to get to a collector to get where they want to get out of there. And as they leave their planned neighborhood, then they're out to a road that's built for higher speeds. And then from here, they go to another roadway that's built for higher speed, so.
And you said the developer, their preference is option 2? Is that what you said?
Based on what they submitted.
Based on
I
what
would
they've
say, yeah.
submitted, they've shown that option 2 is what they would prefer. It is also what the Taylor family has gone on record and at least shared with us of what they would prefer, and the Brandt property that does not want to see that 90 come down or the parkway come down right to 190th. We spoke with the Walls landowner who kind of said, we don't really care too much. I mean, we haven't, they weren't in attendance at the meeting, but said we really, more than anything, just want you to expand your MUSA and let us sell this for development. And rightfully so, Ms. Cerny who reached out with the kind of potential of a third option is one of, is impacted differently than some of the others in that it's right at that development's right there, and this is the time for us to kind of decide where it's going.
But personally, I really like the idea of it dividing the zonings. I think option 2 makes a lot of sense from that perspective, as well as the conversation that's been had about having all that development to the north of it that you don't necessarily get with option 1.
I agree. I'm in favor of option 2 as well, dividing residential and business.
Well, I see that option 2 will take much longer to build if it's developer driven. I favor it. I think that option one is showing effectively 2 access points to neighborhoods and then leaves us this huge gap of how do we funnel this traffic in 10 years when those houses are built. And I can remember when everything north of here wasn't built. And I think at that time, had we done more long-term planning, it might have been less expensive for us even then. Option two leaves us a much longer-term perspective, even though it might cost more to build. I think it will be far less in the long run and more functional. Another piece I think that hasn't been brought up is option one leaves a very or relatively straight east-west corridor, which makes for a shortcut between what will be a county road and 61, likely a county road at some point as well. And I think that that would cause significant traffic to go on it when things like 97 are under construction or have an accident and cause additional issues, whereas when you have that leg shoot down, it actually would reduce that as a Google Maps or Apple Maps feature to say, here, take this route. It's faster.
This is great. This is one of the things that we wanted to come and say, hey, we've been working on this. We've met with landowners. This helps us kind of keep moving forward. We'll at some point meet with our planning commissioner council, just gauge their feedback as well. That'll help bring us, get Ryan's team moving forward and trying to get some concept designs. Another part of this study is to look at some ordinance language that kind of talks about the development of the roadways now versus the development of the roadway we need in 30 years and how we kind of phase those development standards. So you'll be seeing some more things coming forward in the coming months. It's our hope that by no later than the spring, we've got kind of a 75%, 50, 90% baked cake to bring forward and hopefully get some buy-in and adoption by the city that then we can take back to the development community. I do agree with you, Commissioner Legness. This is not, long-range planning isn't this is for a tomorrow thing, but the development is right on this doorstep. We're going to be doing some comprehensive planning update. I think within the next 5 years, we're going to see that area really boom. This kind of stuff really helps drive that. And I'm with the hope, as Ryan had mentioned, that with these long-range plans, that then we are better equipped to kind of go to some state federal funding sources and say, look, we've got a plan, we need some assistance. And hopefully it doesn't cost the development community or the city as much, so.
Well, thank you, Abby, and thank you, Ryan. Appreciate your work on this. Next up, wetland delineations. Abby.
So staff's recently learned that the wetland delineations for all city-owned parcels that we have for sale are expired. Wetland delineations expire after 5 years. And so the one for the Airport Business Park and Headwaters 123 are no longer valid. Wetland delineations unfortunately cannot occur in wintertime months. So our wetland delineation season is closed right now. But I wanted to bring this to the EDA to start to talk about spring opportunities of whether or not you'd like to update wetland delineations for city-owned vacant lands. Obviously, if we engaged with a consultant, I'd be bringing back to you any proposals for cost estimates, but I wanted to see about getting this on, at least in our work plan discussions for this year. So I see some nodding heads. We can always come back and talk about this, but from an EDA perspective, the marketability of our parcels and knowing exactly where the wetlands are is kind of necessary for future development. So then the next one that I have a question for you is, would the EDA be willing to pay for costs associated with wetland delineations on publicly owned sites? We do have the opportunity to utilize or make application to utilize CDA pre-development dollars, and I would imagine the EDA would like us to try to utilize those funding sources where possible. So I can, as we're looking at developing out some work plan, we do the Southwest Area Infrastructure Study is being partially funded by that. There is a cap, so we need to kind of stagger out our asks so we don't hit our limit with the county, and the hope is maybe we can get both those delineations done in the spring if our Southwest Infrastructure Phasing Study is done by then. And then the next question that I would have is, in some cases, EDA will assist landowners with conducting wetland assessments on their properties when the EDA finds that there's some sort of future economic development. So a really good example might be properties along the Highway 97 corridor. We know right now that development eventually is going to occur on these properties. Is the EDA interested if a landowner says, hey, can you guys help with some of this? Hearing proposals of that nature.
You guys go 3 questions or just the last one?
I got a lot of head nods on, would you like me to update wetland delineations? And let's tap into other public funding sources. So I think I got the answers on those first 2 ones, but I think you should discuss it.
Just a quick point of clarification. Those wetland delineations on the publicly owned land, is it just the Headwaters 123 in the airport park that we're talking about?
At least right now, those are our 2 primary sites that we have, that we've got out on investinforestlake.com. So there are other parcels that we would be looking at potentially starting to market. I think that then we'd start to talk about what kind of pre-development investment we'd want to make in those parcels before we start marketing them.
Okay, thanks.
How does that affect the potential sale of those properties? Have offers coming in based on the wetland delineation?
Well, I think anybody in the development community would know that the wetland delineations that are on file are expired, and that's just an open disclosure item that I would also share, but their offers would be with knowing that that exists, but a new one would need to be updated. The airport business park parcels do have an option right now and a first right of refusal. Those were accepted with expired delineations. The future potential purchaser is aware that the delineations are not updated, does know that we're going to have this conversation about updating them in the spring. It does make that offer a little tricky. That offer will expire in June. Spring could come, we might have that delineation done by then, but it does make that parcel harder to plan now until that delineation is done. So I would say that for offers that we currently have out there, we may see a request for an extension at some point until after the delineation is done and design could occur on the property with respect to where those wetland boundaries are.
Brian, question for you. Typically, how much of a change do you see in a wetland delineation if it expires and if it was done, I don't know when this one was done, but is there a significant change there? I would hope that we could still use what we have on file to try to master plan this site and then tweak it when the updated one comes forward.
Yeah, in 5 years, there's probably not going to be a lot of change. Depends on the seasons you have. If it's been wet, really wet, then there could be some expansion. If there's a drain tile or a pipe that's been plugged, yes, you're going to have some expansion, right? So it's going to always be related to what weather patterns we've had and did anything happen on sites. It could be even just a small pipe that's an outlet to an area. If somebody threw it a driveway, fill it in with some gravel to have a driveway access point to this property now and blocks water, that's when things change. I don't think anything like that's occurred, but it kind of had a couple wet summers, but then really wet or dry. Last 2 winters were really dry, so we didn't have a lot of, wouldn't imagine much change, but it's not an accepted document for permitting, so when a developer were to come forward right now, this is what I want to do, well, we can't define where your wetland buffers are, or if you are proposing wetland impacts, what your mitigation area will be. So then they're never going to finalize the permit until they have a approved delineation. So, watershed and TEP panel, further discussion.
One more question. You talk about, is the EDA interested in
Delineations.
for people interested in developing properties?
They're size dependent. Ryan, do you have a cost estimate of what it took for at least the acreage that we did associated with the Southwest Infrastructure Phasing Project?
It was under 10,000 for that whole area.
Yeah, so those were 100 acres that we maybe did.
It was more than that,
Yeah, I get probably
440s. I mean, right there is one.
160 acres, so.
Pretty modest cost, sounds like.
They are, I mean, I think when it comes to the airport business park parcels and the Headwaters 123, as we start to look at costs associated with those, we're gonna start to get a kind of a scope for those. I think more than anything, the question that I had was just the kind of potential for future incentive program and whether or not that's something that this EDA would be favorable to. It just kind of helps me too with landowners that are like, oh, I'm having trouble, oh, do you have a wetland delineation? Is that something that we could help with?
Across the board, something that we do, or can be an ad hoc decision that we make based on the opportunity?
It could be based on the opportunity. I think the challenge just would be, it needs to be a function of kind of pre-development before, we're starting to get into site planning and design.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we just need to be able to catch them early. Certainly along those corridors that are being developed right now, I think that's a great opportunity to explore those. I know we're most concerned, my primary concern today was talking about our parcels and getting those updated. But since we're here, I thought, well, why not talk about private lands as well?
But in your example, like you were talking about Highway 97 or something in the future, like it might be an opportunity. If someone comes to us and they're saying, hey, will you help out with this? And I've got this premier spot on Highway 97, you bring it to us and we might say, yeah, I think it's in our best interest to help out with this. But it might be some other property that we really don't have a lot of interest in, and for that one we say no. Is that okay to have an ad hoc, or as a city, would that be viewed as unfair and we shouldn't have that?
It's good to at least to help establish some policy related to how we provide public subsidies, and that is part of just work plan development through this first part of 2026. I had to look down to see what next year is going to be. And I think, having some parameters of, it has to be of a certain acreage or access into a certain thing, I think could be helpful for me. Because the last thing I kind of want to do is say, yeah, I think our EDA might be interested, and then bring it, and the EDA is like, no.
I think it would be great to have some guidelines and parameters of, criteria or something. I think, that's just my opinion.
Like in this case, you could just say it's publicly land owned by the city right now. That we're talking about.
Sure, Agnes had a question then. Mayor Roberts.
I did. Abby, the costs of this, is that built into the 2026 budget, or would it cause any other, the presumed budget that council will be looking at passing in a couple of weeks, I think? Will it fall into that? Can it be accommodated in that, or will it cause some other shift?
So it would be your EDA budget that you made a recommendation on. You do have professional service dollars that we didn't necessarily specifically say it's for, this exact thing. And so we'd have to look to see how that works in the budget. The other thing is the EDA always has the kind of fund reserve that you do have the ability, your fund is a little bit different than the city's general fund in that you have a little bit of a cushion to be able to say if there's truly an economic development purpose, you could, with a modified budget, dip into that.
So this might affect some of the fund reserve, but that's probably it.
It could, but we would take a look at that as we get closer to deciding if you want to use your monies to move forward with this.
We talked about earlier, just development paying its own way, and it's expensive to develop. And I like the idea of that. It saves the city obviously a lot of money, the taxpayers a lot of money, and putting these roads and infrastructure in these new neighborhoods. So any way we can help on the other side and do things like this, where it's not as expensive as participating in infrastructure, I think is a plus, and it shows a positive, like, we're willing to work with you, whether it's, regardless if it's city-owned or privately owned. And if we can parlay that and partner with the county, I think it just makes sense to at least have that in our toolbox to offer to developers.
Chris, could I just maybe have you pipe in the opportunities with the pre-development fund in terms of private land? If there is the opportunity that the city could potentially tap into those funds?
President Erickson and members, the CDA's pre-development finance fund is actually a grant to the city, and it does require a match, but we can use private funding for the match, so it doesn't have to be public money coming from the match. So for example, if you had a landowner that said, I'm interested in exploring if this 40 acres could be turned into a business park, we would certainly allow that match to come forward and use private match to the public funds that we bring to the table. The one thing that we cannot do is, because it is pre-development funding, is we can't, once a developer's been identified, we can't help that developer, because that would be too far down the road. And this is really to get those sites that are just a little bit harder to get into action, to get them to start rolling a little bit faster. But if a developer is on the site already and has been identified as the developer, then we can't use our funds for that development purpose. We can certainly use private funding from somebody who's exploring the possibility of doing something in that area.
So just to clarify, so there's a current landowner, not a developer, but just a landowner that wants to better understand what the potential is on their property. They could tap into CDA funding.
So the grant has to go to the city. The city would hire the planner, the consultant that does the planning work, but the funding can come from the private landowner until the point in time where a developer has been identified. Then we cannot use our public funding for that property.
I think so, but just to take it a step further, so are we looking maybe for a recommendation from this body to Abby about developing a policy as it relates to our willingness to put forward funds to help with, like, say, wetland delineations?
I think part of that, yes, part of this tonight was that exploration of, should we develop some policy, not only for our properties, but private properties. And what I'm hearing, at least, is when there are properties, yes, we should be getting those as close to shovel-ready as possible. I think that I'm also hearing that you're favorable to the assisting private developers or private property owners in future development opportunities, and that we should probably have some policy just to help keep it fair and equitable. And right now, I think that's all I might need at the moment to then bring something back for you as we talk policy discussion as we're moving forward in the spring. I don't want to get too far right now in if this then that, but I think that this really helps us helps me better understand when I've got a landowner that might need some help or guidance. I can at least say, yeah, our EDA funds this or that. Here's some parameters for it. But I've got at least enough to start drafting something for you to react to.
Or follow-up?
Just some clarification then. So on the airport business park, or like Fenway properties, let's call it, because there's an option out there and a first right of refusal by a developer, that then would not be able to be covered with county funds.
President Erickson, members of the development agreement, as I understand it, has not been signed yet. So the city owns that land, and whether this developer or another developer moves forward with it, you still have to do a wetland delineation on the site. So because you don't have somebody who's signed a development agreement yet, I think it's okay to use the pre-development finance fund at this point. But once the development agreement has been signed, then the developer's in the deal, then we cannot use our grant dollars. And just to clarify one more point, it can only be used for land that's guided for economic development, not for housing.
And that we merely have an option right now, right? Gun companies signed an option. They could exercise their right to a purchase agreement with a development agreement in the future. But right now, they're just doing exploration like any other developer could, or future purchaser could. So Chris and I did talk about how that would be eligible for those pre-development finance dollars.
Excellent. Anything else? All right, thanks for your work on that. Headwaters 123 development planning.
Yeah, so recently the EDA discussed the future development of Headwaters 123 and the idea to explore expanded uses. The EDA said, yeah, we'd be favorable, go talk with the planning commission, let's see what they think first. And then let's maybe start to see about soliciting proposals. But this EDA also said, hey, staff, why don't you also see if we can find somebody that can help us through this process? So I did reach out to both CBRE and Ellers, two different firms that we've worked with for different economic development reasons. CBRE listed properties for us. Ellers has been our kind of go-to with some of the financial policy development, TIF planning, that sort of thing. In talking with both Ellers and CBRE, they both said, hey, I wouldn't do an RFP. You've been sitting with Headwaters 123 out on the market as long as you have. RFPs really take a lot of time and money for developers, and they both thought maybe you need to take a different approach. And one of them had suggested that the city update its concept plan to something a little bit higher level than concept. Where could roads go? Where could utilities exactly go? Hire an engineer and almost get closer to a plating. And the other one said, maybe you want to just take what you have. So kind of everything you've seen in the last couple of months, and send that out to the development community with a questionnaire. Would you be interested in this property? What do you like about this property? What makes this desirable? To kind of just see what exactly the development community thinks about 123. And so in coming to you tonight, I wanted to share with you at least just this idea that two professionals have kind of said, maybe not the right approach, but here's a different alternative. And so what staff has kind of suggested is that potentially what we should do is update our concept plan, not to a full plat, but at least kind of high level, here's where we've kind of identified some alternative uses, just really concept sketch plan. And first off, more than anything, get this out on our Invest in Forest Lake website. Get these documents up on our website to at least just continue to show the public we've got some things out there. And then with that, I think the idea of going to the development community in a different way and kind of saying, here's what we have, what do you think? And just seeing if there's responses. Very similar to an RFP, but I would say it's more of an RFP light. We're not necessarily looking for a specific partner. We're just looking to hear what they have to say. Once we get that feedback, then we have that opportunity to invite them to Forest Lake and see if they want to sit down and talk about what they see for the parcel. And so tonight, this is just bringing this to you to kind of see if you're favorable to this approach. And if so, then I'll start kind of preparing some more materials for you to kind of take a look at to kind of get the ball rolling on keeping something moving forward, but maybe not as intensive as a full RFP.
Right, yes.
Abby, so in your memo that you shared with us in the agenda, option 2, you had noted that the estimated cost was 10 to 15,000.
Yes.
What is that paying for?
That paying for?
Right. Like I see in option 1 that the cost is a little higher, and I understand that it takes an engineer time, but I'm not seeing where those costs are for a round table. I mean, that's a lot of donuts and coffee or.
Well, one, it is to hire the consultant to manage it for us,
Okay.
right? So what the consultant would do is they're pulling together all of our information. They're sitting down with staff. They're putting together essentially a brochure, right? Some marketing kind of package to say, here is the site. And a lot of it is pulling what we already have. I fully acknowledge that, but it's them taking this material and then putting together that questionnaire, developing that questionnaire. What do we want to see in this? What do we want to engage from them? Sending it out to the development community, their points of contact, and addressing any of the inquiries that come in. Then taking that information, coming back to the EDA, sitting down, saying, this is what we heard from who consolidated, this is what we heard, this is what we heard from these exact people. Do we want to move forward with bringing in a few of them? And then helping facilitate those kind of in-house and community sit-down interviews. So it would be specifically to hire a consultant to kind of help just manage that interaction process with the development community. That help address the question?
That answers my question. Thank
And
you.
it would be, that 15 to 20,000 was a broad scope. It would be at an hourly rate. We'd look at getting a scope of services that kind of break out how much for each of the services for an estimated not to exceed cost. That could go up or down depending on kind of how much we'd really want to do. We could get 10 to 12 responses back and we could say, wow, we're hearing every single one of them would submit an RFP today, but only if it's residential. You know, who knows? And then we could decide that we might not want to take another step forward.
Do you not, in essence, putting an RFP out to find this consultant or not?
I mean, I certainly, what I can do is I can ask if there's other consultants to help us.
Do you have someone in mind, one of the two you're already speaking with?
I would recommend we probably move forward with Ellers assisting us with this. They have experience doing it. They've done it for other cities. And so I think that they've got a model that could really just be replicated here. I certainly, at that cost though, can reach out to, I'm sure CBRE would do it. I'm sure there might be another firm or two that might do it and see if those costs would come down. I don't, you know, how much time do we want to spend trying to
Yeah,
find someone?
if I missed the recommendation to hire
I
Ellers,
didn't
I
include,
apologize.
nope, that's okay. I did put, once a concept design is updated, engage with Ellers to assist with that developer roundtable. I may not have essentially said, Ellers said this or CBRE said this. Ellers was the one that proposed the developer roundtable.
And did we not at one point have this listed with CBR, right?
We did.
So I don't know. I think we've given an opportunity. They really didn't, they weren't very motivated to help us on that or market that property other than throwing it on a website and put it out on some different industry type sites. So I'd be more leaning towards Ellers, but open to potentially another option. But I know I don't want you to have to be on the phone shopping this thing out either. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the idea of engaging, and if you recommend Ellers, I'll trust your judgment on that. Having Ellers engage with the community, do a survey, get those results back, and then come back to us to see if a roundtable is worth it and spending the additional component on that, but perhaps having that as part of that initial conversation with them, that unless it's very clear from the survey, and a roundtable would be beneficial, that we have that option to go that direction or not.
Yeah, and Ellers fully admits that the term roundtable isn't the best, because I think we all think of a roundtable like, hey, come in, let's sit down. It was more like a targeted interaction approach. That first step, let's send out some surveys, let's see who might have some interest, and then kind of bringing them in on a one-on-one.
Oh,
So this idea that, okay, you're developer A and Jill's developer B and Leif's developer C, then later bringing you in for this, okay, here's a community tour, here's an interview, what do you kind of think? To see if you flesh out, is there a development partnership and opportunity potential, if that makes sense?
Qualifying them in a way.
it does.
Yeah, and it just it just sounds like it just tends to be, yes, it might be a little bit more one-on-one time, but you're not spending as much time developing a full proposal that is just a thank you, no thank you.
So those one-on-one, sorry, Mr. Chair, so those one-on-one meetings, is it one-on-two, meaning that staff is involved in it as well, or is it only Ellers and
No,
them?
it would not be only Ellers. It would probably be Ellers, myself, it might be Chris Eng there, it might be, President Erickson, Mary Roberts. It could be a committee of people that are engaged with them through that process. I would, want to explore that scope a little bit more with Ellers to kind of see what their recommendations would be. I don't imagine we're going to, take a whole contingency. But yes, I would envision us having more than just myself or more than just Ellers involved in those one-on-ones.
I would suggest that maybe they just be recorded. I mean, if we're narrowing it down to like between 1 and 3 candidates, unless it's forbidden or whatever, but that's typically,
Yeah, I mean,
Pretty easy to
and that
do.
might work if there is that true interview, but I do think that it's going to be a lot more casual of a,
oh,
you
that's
know,
okay.
coffee meet and greet. Let's
Yeah.
go see the site. Here's some of the things
It's
that are
just a great
around
way,
it.
unless, even
Yeah.
with the AI note taker now, it's like you get, everyone gets a summary of what they pitched, what their ideas are, and then it's a great summary for us without having to.
Yeah, yeah.
So, great conversation. I think Abby's looking for some direction. Are we favorable to what I like the idea of updating it, getting it on our website, as well as engaging, whether it be Ellers or another organization. I think Ellers might be a great choice to guide this, to move forward with that roundtable, quote unquote.
I had a quick question that, it says staff is proposing the EDA to consider, and then you have the 1 and 2. It said updating the 2023 Job Center concept to show the previously discussed future land uses. Is it necessary to show the past if we're not really going there, or or is that really meant to say in our updated plan?
Yeah, so I'm gonna plug in really quick here.
And my second part to that question is, because that was that's 2023. I was just wondering, like, we're not opening it up to any, like, listening sessions or whatever with the community to make sure that we're still, like,
No, I think, at least in kind of previous discussions, in 2023, the EDA updated this kind of technology park design. And in recent conversations with both the EDA and the council, we've looked through these kind of different design concepts. And it seemed like most people were kind of favorable to this idea of larger lot design, more in the middle. Both the Planning Commission and EDA said, yeah, maybe a little service along the parkway might not be bad, and maybe a little residential along Fenway might not be bad. But generally speaking, we want to kind of see those larger lots in the middle. When I talk about an update, it would be taking this plan and maybe just carving off something more adjacent to the parkway, adjacent to Fenway, or even down closer to the golf course, and maybe just kind of color coding it that says future business park, future neighborhood service, future residential, or, as a high-level concept, not binding us in any way to anything, but I think showing that we're not so completely stuck on it's this exact lot configuration with this exact land uses.
I'm quite favorable to the second approach, especially how you described it differently than what I visualized a roundtable as. And so I like that approach. For clarity, you would put this on discussion items, so you're not looking for a motion from us
I'm
tonight,
not looking
correct?
for a motion, I'm just looking for direction, because I'll need to bring back some consultant proposals for you to formally approve and us start getting work on. I think the thing that I would like to know is whether or not the EDA sees favorability in updating this based on land use, or just even putting these out on investinforestlake.com at this time. The EDA, when these were completed in 2023, did not want to use these publicly. And so, while I've shared them, if there had been someone who had come in, these aren't sitting out on your website right now. Do we want to be putting these out there, or do we want to, and then if we go through them on Invest in Forest Lake, and I think that that's not a bad idea, right? The more people get to thinking, what could this be? Then the other thing is, do we want to update this sketch just slightly to say it's not just entirely a job center? We'd be looking at some mixture of uses along those roadways.
I'm favorable to having it on the website, but I would make like any graphic explicitly clear that it is a city-drawn concept and
Concept
like not a
design
proposal.
only,
Like,
yes, yeah.
have a nice little red watermark right over the middle of it, so someone doesn't like screenshot that thing and put it on social media and say,
Well,
here's
don't-
what the city hall is
Exactly, yeah.
doing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not,
I think it's great to have it out on the website because, people do ask, or you talk about something about, that land, what's happening down there. And so the more transparent, more information that we can give people, the better.
great, I have enough direction to bring something back.
All right, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion portion of the agenda. We'll move on to updates. Abby.
Just wanted to let you know, the council at their last meeting, recent meeting, did authorize the decertification of 2 tax increment financing districts. One is the Cherrywood Point TIF District, that will add an estimated just over $200,000 to the city's tax capacity. And the other one is the Centennial District, which will add about just under $15,000 to the city's tax capacity. And so that will be effective capacity. It will be effective for the pay year 2026. So it's just kind of going to show that TIF districts can work over time when they're paid back, and then you start to put that money back into the potential tax revenue. So that was just providing to you as an FYI. I have a couple that I didn't put on here. The city or the county CDA has approved the local affordable housing agreement with the city. They will be administering the city's funds on our behalf. And so we're working right now on transferring those funds to them. And then we're going to start working on marketing their programs for use within the city for local housing rehabilitation. So there will be single family and multifamily options available. It's low interest, no interest loans. Also, next Monday, the council has their hearing on the 2026 budget, potential adoption of the 2026 budget. And so just keeping you all informed of that. And then lastly, providing an update, I haven't brought back your work plan discussion, as this body really wanted to kind of see what came out of the council's strategic planning session. As of right now, the council doesn't have an adopted strategic plan. There were 2 directives kind of developed. And so from that, I think I can pull some of the information that was discussed, at least in the council's strategic planning session, to bring back of how we tailor the work plan to kind of help support that. I'm going to put that on in January because I really don't want us to kind of be operating too long without a work plan, because I really think that it helps keep us kind of on track of actually achieving things. And so just know that I heard what you said. Let's not talk about that until there's a strategic plan, but I think the council needs some time in their strategic plan development before we've got better direction from that. So,
All right.
any questions?
Any questions for Abby? Chris?
Thank you, President Erickson and members. I don't have any formal updates, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Annette?
Thank you, President Erickson, and greetings, Council, EDA. The Forest Lake Area Chamber did hire recently, so we've been onboarding our new employee, which has been going fantastic. I do want to let this group know that the City of Forest Lake Arts in the Park program was also an annual awards winner this year, so we just presented our annual awards at the beginning of November, so congratulations on that. Currently, we're knee-deep. Hometown holiday for Forest Lake is on Friday, so we are working on that and excited to celebrate the holiday season with our community. And we have wrapped up all of our volunteers, and we're ready to go. And I do want to remind you and let you know that next Tuesday, we'll be meeting here at 7:30 a.m. for our local leaders, Forest Lake area local leaders collaboration, where we hear updates from our schools, our local government, and business. And you're all welcome to attend. Several of you will be on panels during that presentation. So that is next Tuesday at 7:30. And then lastly, we're just really looking ahead and setting all our dates and making our plans for 2026. Any questions?
Thanks for
Thank
being here this evening. Ryan, anything you want to add?
No additional comments?
All right, thank you. Any updates from this body? Seeing none, I'm gonna entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all in favor? Aye.